Doc. What's going on, man? How are you?
We're doing very well here, Neil, and you?
Fantastic. And today's topic's leukemia and pregnancy. What is leukemia?
It's cancer of the blood and the blood-forming organs. There are several groups of blood-forming organs, but the bone marrow is the main group of blood-forming organs. And leukemia involves excessive growth of abnormal white cells, which don't function properly, and they crowd out the good or healthy cells.
Why is it difficult to diagnose leukemia in pregnancy?
There are so many things in pregnancy that look like leukemia. For example, you're going to have an elevated white count, which is one of the ways that you would diagnose leukemia. And a normal white count in pregnancy can be as high as 14 or 15,000, whereas in a non-pregnant state, that would be probably 5,000 to 9,000. So there's quite an elevation, and that elevation is typical of leukemia.
How do white blood cell numbers change during pregnancy?
They do increase, and again, it can go from 5 to 9,000 up to 14, 15,000 and be normal. We don't really know why that happens. Some people say stress. Every time you turn around, people are talking about stress. Immune adaptation, that is getting ready for the baby.
Why is immune system suppressed in pregnancy?
So the immune system has to be depressed. There are really two things that have to happen to make pregnancy work. One of them is an increase in vascular volume, but the other one, really important, is the suppression of rejection. And that's because half of the genes in baby come from dad. So those are foreign genes. So mom has to tolerate those genes for 38 weeks during pregnancy. So again, that immune response is a mandatory and absolutely necessary response to the baby by mom.
Should I be concerned about higher white blood counts during pregnancy?
Well, it depends on, Neil, exactly what you're talking about. But generally speaking, a white count of 14 or 15,000 isn't necessarily a cause for alarm. It's much more likely to be normal for pregnancy than it is to indicate any kind of health, any kind of illness, and certainly not very likely to indicate leukemia.
Why is it difficult to diagnose infections in late pregnancy?
No, part of the problem is really a double-edged sword because in the first place, like we've been talking about, the white count is elevated. But the response to infection is muted or attenuated. In other words, you don't get as much of a white count in pregnancy as you would ordinarily get. And that's because of this immune suppression in order to keep this little foreign body in mom's body.
What are the treatments for leukemia?
There are several. Chemo, of course, everybody knows that. Immune therapies, radiation therapy, targeting the proteins in the cancer cells. That's called CAR T. It's a relatively new idea, but it's a good idea because it really affects just the cancer cells and not a whole bunch of other cells. Then, of course, there are a lot of cancers that do not, leukemias that aren't aggressive. So, watchful waiting is another way to deal with this. So, 5 or 6 treatments.
How might pregnancy and postpartum period affect diagnosis?
Well, of course, it is harder because the white count is elevated normally. And then this inflammatory response is blunted. So, there are special, in the news now today, of course, is Tatiana Schlossberg. and she has acute myeloid leukemia, AML, which it has a shorter 5-year survival, like 28%. She has an inversion of 3, which makes it very aggressive and hard to treat.
How rare is the subtype AML inversion 3?
It is very uncommon. Probably about 5% of all people with AML have inversion 3. It's found more often in older people, and when they have the inversion 3, they really have a short lifespan if they're old already.
What is the prognosis for leukemia?
Well, it depends on how old you are and what kind of leukemia you have, but basically, older people have more trouble with leukemia than younger people. The best leukemia to have is chronic lymphocytic leukemia, or CLL, and that survival rate is about 90% for 5 years. So that's a good kind of leukemia to have. On the other hand, the acute lymphocytic leukemia is more common in children, but they do better with that than adults do, and their survival rate is around 60 to 70% for 5 years.
All right. The best place to go is worlddocallen.com and pick up Pregnancy Your Weight, available today on Amazon. Thanks, Doc.